Today we are reading from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, chapter 12, text 10. 10? 10. Okay. Acharyara matayai se matasara Tanra agya langi chale se tanra sara Acharyara matayai se matasara Tanra agya langi chale se tasara Acharyara of the spiritual master Advaita Prabhu. Mata, opinion. Yea, what is? Say, that. Mata, opinion. Sara, active principle. Tanra, his. Agya, order. Langi, transgressing. Chale, becomes. Say, that. Ta, however. Asara, useless. Some ominous words in here, isn't there? The order of the spiritual master is the active principle in spiritual life. Anyone who disobeys the order of the spiritual master immediately becomes useless. Purport. Here is the opinion of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Persons who strictly follow the orders of the spiritual master are useful in executing the will of the Supreme, whereas persons who deviate from the strict order of the spiritual master are useless. So we are going to read text 11 and 12 because this is sort of covering the same point. So we'll cover these three slokas today. Asyara nama ihanahi prayagyana vedajani barakari ekatra ganana. There is no need to name those who are useless. I have mentioned them only to distinguish them from useful devotees. So just to put that into perspective, it's got somewhere that it's actually in the synonyms Acharyara of the spiritual master, and it's referring to Advaita Prabhu. So that's just in the sort of transliterations, but it doesn't appear on the translation. Text 12. Danya rasi mape jaiche patna sahite paschata patna udana samskara karite. Paddy is mixed with straw at first, and one must fan it to separate the paddy from the straw. Purport. This example given by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is very appropriate. In the case of the Gaudiya Math members, one can apply a similar process. There are many disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but to judge who is actually his disciple, to divide the useful from the useless, one must measure the activities of such disciples in executing the will of the spiritual master. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur tried his best to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to countries outside India. When he was present, he patronized the disciples to go outside India to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But they were unsuccessful because within their minds they were not actually serious about preaching his cult in foreign countries. They simply want to take credit for having gone to foreign lands and utilize this recognition in India by advertising themselves as repatriated preachers. Many swamis have adopted this hypocritical means of preaching for the last 80 years or more. But no one can preach the real cult of Krishna consciousness all over the world. They merely come back to India falsely advertising that they'd converted all the foreigners to ideas of Vedanta or Krishna consciousness. And then they collected funds in India and lived satisfied lives of material comfort. As one fans paddy to separate the real paddy from useless straw by accepting the criterion recommended by Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, one can very easily understand who is a genuine world preacher and who is useless. Durga me parimendhasya skalatati katir mohosva kripa yusada. Nenna shantu valambanam mam agyanati mirandasya chananjara chalakayas chaksur militam yeda tashmei Sri Guruve Namaha. So this is a rather very strong purport by Srila Prabhupada, and you can feel the emotions that have come out in the purport there when Krishna Das Kaviraj just enunciates. This is within his time just after Advaita Acharya Prabhu had left the planet, and he probably personally knew his 6 sons, and then he found that 3 of the sons had actually deviated, gone away from what Advaita Acharya Prabhu was teaching about the glories of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and that become Shmarta Brahmins, and their philosophy had been tainted. So Srila Prabhupada compares his situation in the same light. So I'll help put it into perspective. It's a really nice sloka to be talking about today, because yesterday was the disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada, and everybody got 5 minutes to talk about Srila Prabhupada, and by the time you said a few sentences, the bell rang and your time was up. So I'm sure all the devotees would have wanted to spend a lot more time talking about the glories of Srila Prabhupada. So what's really prominent here is the example of rice and chaff. That's sort of mentioned quite a few times. Rice and paddy. So paddy's rice and straw. So we don't grow rice that much, but in the fields, the very prominent task that villagers had in the fields, and still happens, that they used to beat the when the rice was harvested, they beat the rice and separate it from all the straw. In the West, we don't grow rice as much as we do with wheat. So we have a saying in the West now: sort the wheat out from the chaff. Have you ever been labelled as chaff? I have, especially when it comes to sport. You know, there's the wheat and the chaff. You put the person out in the sports field, and you really see where his acumen is at. Forget about, your technique or your ability. You just sort of, it's actually your resolution, the wheat from the chaff. So Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing the principle of this point, that he states that he never received any help from his godbrothers. So we know that he was very faithful to his spiritual master's instruction to take this Krishna consciousness to the rest of the world, not only the West, but the rest of the world. And he diligently translated the Srimad Bhagavatam, and when he had enough books under his name, when he felt like he'd translate enough books like the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, he was ready to go to the West. And he did. And with great effort, after 1.5 years, finally the results start to pay off, that there was a whole group within the society of the West that were disillusioned with the West, and they wanted to hear from Srila Prabhupada. They wanted to hear what is coming from the East. What is the wisdom of the East? because actually the East preserved the wisdom. The West had all the material knowledge, but they were seriously lacking in wisdom. So then Prabhupada thought that because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told everybody, all his disciples, that you should all preach this to the West, he thought, now I'm having some success, and I'll ask my godbrothers. He was very impoverished, and he could see that if he had a temple, that he could make some progress there. The people were interested, they would come to the temple. But despite all his endeavours, he didn't receive any help from the godbrothers, and partly that was due to their conception of who Srila Prabhupada was, that he hadn't lived in the temple, he'd been a grihastha, now he's a sannyasi, and they were proud of their heritage, that I've been a sannyasi, I've been a brahmachari, like that, and why should I help him? So that might have been one thing, or for whatever purpose, they did not actually give any assistance to Srila Prabhupada, not even a madanga. They could have given him a madanga or some cartels or something like that, so it was zero help. So he remembered that, and not only that, it's just like he mentions in the fact, the example of wheat and the chaff, that some of his godbrothers travelled at great expense to the Math when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was still alive, and they went to preach in England to sannyasis. I know they went there, and all they got was a preaching program to some ladies in the communities called the Blavatsky Society, the Blavatsky Theosophical Society. So they gave a few lectures in a hall with a few ladies attending, and that's about as far as they got. And then they come back, oh yes, we've been preaching in England, great accolades, that we made the effort, we went there, but actually they didn't receive anything. So now they didn't receive any, they didn't actually produce any results. So now we see the example of wheat from the chaff. So nothing to show, paddy blown away. So not only that, when Srila Prabhupada actually started to produce the results, what his spiritual master wanted, and he received the mercy of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, that people actually start to embrace Vaishnavism, people from the West, exactly what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj wanted. And he went over to India with his disciples to show India this is Vaishnavism, and the population of India in general was really astounded at how, because they're thinking in terms of Hinduism, how are these, people, these white young people taken to Hinduism? It's only like they were thinking it's a very parochial thing, it only belongs to their nation, right? So they were very much astounded, but his godbrothers, some began to criticise him for doing that, he was successful, and yet they were saying that, he shouldn't be making devotees out of these people, they're malechas, how can they become Brahmins, how can he have equal numbers of women and men, because actually only women could be Brahmanas. So Srila Prabhupada actually took the order to its essence. He took it right back to Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declared that Prachivate, in every town and village, this chanting will be heard, and anybody can take to the chanting. And he gave the example, he lived the example by initiating even the most fallen people such as Jagai and Madai. We all many Jagai and Madais, but we're not as big, wretched, sinful personalities like those two people were, fallen Brahmanas, and yet they become the greatest saints due to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. So this is the essence of Vaishnavism, that anybody can take to Krishna consciousness, and all these bright shining faces that were preaching Krishna consciousness really got to the got under the skin of of his godbrothers within the Gaudiya Math. But they were caught up in their rules and the regulations, and the preaching had more or less dried up amongst themselves in India, and all their temples actually started to just become dishevelled and dishevelled and falling apart. So subsequently, because of Srila Prabhupada's preaching 50 years later, their temples have been revived just because so many people have embraced Vaishnavism. So this is the potency of carrying on the spiritual master's instructions, whereas Srila Prabhupada, he went and he spread Krishna consciousness throughout the West and focused so much on printing of the books. The godbrothers just dried up and they just started arguing amongst themselves which temple they should have. And because the preaching spirit wasn't there, people stopped coming. So here, the first sloka really emphasises that the order of the spiritual master is the active principle in spiritual life. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he carried on the order of the parampara, and his mission was twofold. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, of course, was the spiritual master Srila Prabhupada. So we see him in the pictures over there on the far left, and he's the second one from the right there. So he had a twofold mission, book printing and preaching all over the world. And we can trace his lineage of the spiritual masters, that his preceptor and Father Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he revived this Vaishnavism in the 1800s, and he had that fervour to spread it all over the world, even though nobody travelled outside of India in the 1800s. It just stayed in India. But what he did, he sent books to all the universities throughout the world. And there's this little book called The Life and Precepts of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and that found its way into the University of New South Wales in Sydney in 1890, and it was sitting there in the 1970s until somebody from ISKCON appropriated it. But it just shows that the preaching spirit was there. So of course Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had that fervour. So Bhaktisiddhanta had all these printing presses, and he profusely distributed books throughout India, and within a short space of time he opened up about 36 centres, I think, and they were all in principal towns and cities throughout India. It was very, very potent. And so Srila Prabhupada kept that instruction well within his duties. That's one of his duties also, to spread the books about Krishna. So when he actually came to New York, Srila Prabhupada was trying to establish Krishna consciousness. So when he had some disciples, the first thing they did was print Back to Godheads. So actually Back to Godhead is almost like it's like an elephant graveyard, so to speak, in Krishna consciousness these days. But this is how we thrived in the early days. That first of all, Prabhupada had these little magazines, black and white, which he printed, which devotees would go out in the street and sell for 20 cents and maintain the temples. And then for the next 5 or 10 years, this was how we saw that Krishna consciousness was spreading, because then the Back to Godheads, they started to print them in colour, nice glossy magazines, and they'd send them out to all the temples over the world. By that time, within 5 or 6 years, devotees gone out, there were 50, 60, 70, 80 temples all over the world, and the Back to Godheads would come. It was very, very exciting. I remember we'd read the Back to Godhead and we'd find out what's happening all around the world, and then we'd distribute to everybody in the street. This was our means of distribution, Back to Godheads, $1, $2 or whatever. So somehow or other, over the course of time now, there are not many Back to Godheads around. They were like the basis of ISKCON. But I think they've given away to all these different Veda bases, ISKCON Desires, and I don't know what other forums. What's the other big forums on the internet where you can... Dandavats, yeah, Dandavats. So if you want to know what's going on around ISKCON, you just get your finger, you scroll Dandavats. So it's not quite the same, but still this is how it's going. But still... From there, when we had the Back to Godheads, then Srila Prabhupada, the epic transition was when he got a contract with Macmillan Publishing, and they published that beautiful big thick Bhagavad Gita. And from then on, the big books arrived. It was like, it's called the Big Madanga, right? That they were resounding all over the world. And as Prabhupada expanded this movement to all the towns and countries all over the world, he would also translate the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Srimad Bhagavatam would be printed book after book, and then the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. And I know when I was around in the 70s, it was such an exciting time to be in, because we'd be distributing these big books, and big boxes would arrive. We'd take them with us to the country town. We'd open up some box, and it was a new canto, maybe the 6th canto or the 7th canto, and we'd never seen these pictures before. Mahavishnu riding on Garuda, and someone having this big fire sacrifice. It was really just awesome. So it was very exciting, and these books were going out all around the world, and we still have that saying that the books are the basis, and there's still a connection by which so many devotees have joined. So then Srila Prabhupada not only facilitated book distribution, but then he started to spread the message of Krishna consciousness all over the world, not only in the United States, but he had that vision that it was going to go all over the world, just carry out his spiritual master's instruction, take this preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. And he empowered the devotees to do so. Some of the devotees that went and started centres all over England, Australia, New Zealand, all over the world, they thought they were actually bulletproof, because they had Prabhupada to support them. And then as soon as they opened up the centre, Prabhupada would be there to help them, encourage them to open up their centres, just like when they come to Australia. The two first devotees, Bali Madan and Upendra, they were just brahmacharis. How long they've been around for? A couple of years or something like that. Open up a centre, open up Australia. So they came to Sydney, and there's a classic photo of Upendra playing Madanga with one hand, giving out Back to Godheads with the other hand, like that, Bali Madan preaching. So there's a bit of, they got a bit of publicity in Sydney and everything, and lo and behold, within like 1 year, there's like about 40 devotees in the temple. It just caught like wildfire. Then Srila Prabhupada came, and what did he do? He brought the deities. He brought Radha Gopinath. He said, Radha Gopinath, you take care of these people. So, and then Prabhupada came every year. He came for 5 or 6 years, and the Australian Yatra has grown so much. Same in New Zealand. So he was pleased, actually. Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the effort of the devotees. Now, it doesn't matter how great or small, that they all take part in this spreading Krishna consciousness, helping with his movement. And then what was really significant was that Prabhupada, he brought Krishna consciousness back to India, that he'd taken it out of India. He couldn't break through in India. He tried for so many years, have so many leagues and societies, and try to get devotees on board, but it couldn't break through. And then when everybody from the West started to come to India, and the Indian population in general noticed that these people are taking to it, and because of their preaching, life membership programs, and so on and so forth, it actually began to spread all over India, and the devotees were part and parcel of it. There's that classic story of our friend Guru Das who came here. He said that they were sent to India. There's a whole team of devotees that first went to India. It's about 17 devotees, and they were travelling all around the big cities. And they went to Amritsar. I think that's up in Punjab, there, Sikh territory. And they were come back from Amritsar, and they were cozily sitting in the carriage with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's preaching to them, and thinking life can't be better than that. They were on their way to Delhi. And they stopped in Delhi, and somehow or other this person made his way to the carriage, even though they were trying to keep everybody out of the carriage from annoying Srila Prabhupada. And he pitched a plan to Srila Prabhupada that we can open up a temple in Delhi. Of course, they had nothing. They had no temples in India at that stage. So Prabhupada's listening, and he thought, that's not a bad idea. Guru Das, hop off the train, go and start a temple in Delhi. Right? He was married to Yamuna, so Guru Das Yamuna, Banu Swami, and 3 others, Shyamananda. They got off the train. All of a sudden, the train left. Prabhupada was gone, and here they were in Delhi. You know, opened up a temple with this guy who was a bit of a dud in the end. So it was very difficult, but they carried out their spiritual master's instructions. They tried. They weren't that successful, but now if you go to Delhi, there are so many beautiful, wonderful temples right there now. The temple in East Kailash is huge, on top of a hill, and there's 5 or 6 other sub-temples, and then many other preaching branches throughout the world. So within 50 years, Srila Prabhupada's actually touched the hearts of the Indian population. Now we see that all over the world. The Indian population's taken up the strain and supported all the ISKCON temples also throughout Australia and everywhere actually. And even now, the Prime Minister of England, just been a Prime Minister for a week, right? Named Sanak Rishi, that just the word Sanak means Sanak Kumar, the 4 Kumaras, great saints. Rishi means a great sage, so that's his name. So obviously he's come from a pretty strong Vedic heritage. So when it was Diwali last week, he went back to Vedanta Manor and he offered a candle to the Lords, and he also paid obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada would be very happy to see that the Prime Minister of England is paying obeisances to him. So we are coming Krishna consciousness due to the power of Srila Prabhupada is expanding in a very positive way as a positive alternative to society. So in our situation where we're at right now is that the books have gone out and the preaching is there. So now when people are coming, it's the duty of the disciples and the grand disciples of Srila Prabhupada to put forward something that is acceptable to people as a positive alternative to the society in which they're living today. Of course, there's that epic prediction by Srila Prabhupada that in due course of time people are going to be harassed so much by the government and by the taxes that are imposed by the government in the cities, and they're going to become such hellish places, if they aren't already, that people will be fleeing the cities and coming to the country. So if they come to the country, what do they see? Not much. Gum trees and empty fields full of full of some crops or something, but not really anything that's sustainable. The only sustainable places are the ashrams, the places of shelter. And more people come to our place because we have this positive alternative Srila Prabhupada has given us, and we're expanding upon it on so many different fronts. That's why devotees are always busy and they're always encouraging other people to come and join. because this is a growing movement. It's very, very vibrant, and it's actually going back through the succession of spiritual masters, because Srila Prabhupada actually is carrying on the orders of the spiritual master. Just like Ram Prabhu, Ram Prasad Prabhu gave this very epic statement, delivered this epic statement yesterday. He said that when a powerful spiritual master comes, he paves the way, he creates a path for others to follow. So this is how we're actually following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, because he's carved a big swathe throughout the society to help us to establish this beautiful Vaishnava movement. So just the point that's being made here is that all the spiritual masters, so Krishnadas Kaviraj is expressing his disappointment how the sons of Advaita Acharya, 3 sons became devotees and 3 sons became impersonalists. So next week's sloka, which starts with text 13, talks about the great devotee sons of Advaita Acharya. So I'll leave that for the speaker. But the spiritual masters all have been strongly preaching against impersonalism and voidism, just like our prayer to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha. Nirvisesha means voidism, sunya, or impersonalism, or Nirvisesha Sunyavadi. I don't know which one means which, but Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschata Desatarine, that our spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, is so strong that he's just driving out all the voidists and the impersonalists. And Srila Prabhupada also very strong. He went looking for them, bring me the philosophers, bring me the impersonalists. So, who is God? So he'd start dismantling any one of these so-called great philosophers of Western societies that came in his presence, and he also dismantled their philosophies that were written in the books. There's a really interesting book that was written, Prabhupada's conversation about all the different philosophers, and I think it's called Dialectics.
Spiritualism.
Is that still available?
There's an abridged version called Beyond Illusion and Doubt.
Beyond
Illusion and Doubt.
Right, okay, it's called Beyond Illusion and Doubt. So it covers all the modern day philosophers, and if they're right or they're wrong, but basically it's pointing at the fact that the voidist philosophies are still seeping through society today. Krishnadas Kaviraj, he talks about the sons, and they were of Advaita, they were influenced by Shmata Brahmana philosophy, that they become swayed by all the ritualistic performances and the flowery words from the Vedas, from the Brahmanas. And when the Smritas, they debate the philosophy, they arrive at their own conclusions, and based on a lot of their conclusions, they come to an impersonal conclusion that God is void, so he's just the impersonal Brahman. Of course, Vaishnavs rail at that, because they say it's just the first stage of God realization. Beyond impersonalism is the person who's creating this Brahman effulgence which you were talking about. So that sometimes because of the prowess and the attraction to the knowledge, that people become swayed, that these people seem to be the authorities, and they get the approval, and then they sway the masses. So this was going on at Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. He also so powerful that he really put the Shmata Brahmanas so far offside that when he was in Vrindavan, they plotted to kill him. They organised a plot that they were going to stone him as he was going past somewhere. But then somebody told him about the plot, and he avoided that, and he left the place. So this is this is the where am I up to here? So this is Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta. So all the way through, there is that fight in Kali Yuga. That Kali Yuga is actually an age where hypocrisy rules. So religions deemed to be irreligion, real religions deemed to be irreligion, and irreligion is religion. So we are trying to establish a base where we can understand, in the spirit of our disciplic succession, that there is a theistic solution, and that we are all part and parcels of a Supreme Person who's got a plan, and we have a connection with Him. So modern times, the voidism is there. We go out. I think it's a very appropriate word, voidism, because there's actually a big void in the philosophy. No one's got one. There's hardly any philosophy. They want to shirk it, really. Most people don't want to actually go there. They're very happy with politics and sport and just day-to-day affairs, but they don't want to go beyond that. But actually, this is inherent new human nature. Who am I? Where am I going? That's philosophy. What is my purpose in life? A philosophical discussion is good for everybody. People used to thrive on it in the old days, but nowadays they've been duped by the materialist society and the so-called scientists, which Prabhupada really slams. So in the spirit of disciplic succession, we are tackling this head on and giving Krishna consciousness to everybody, putting it out there. So my voice is a bit hoarse today, excuse me, because we were really putting it out there in Surface Paradise last night, chanting the holy names. And you see the power of the holy names, how it works, that people very much, are very receptive to it, raise their arms up in the air. I have to tell this story. This is a great story about the two ladies that came with us. What are their names? Elsa and Emily. 3 weeks ago, they just arrived from Sydney. They're from Germany, and they were in Surface Paradise on a Saturday night. They were just seeing, well, what's in Surface on Saturday night? And the chanting party came past, and they'd never seen a chanting party before, so they just filmed it, and then they showed it's Elsa. She showed herself like this look of astonishment, like, who are these guys, right? And lo and behold, they signed up for the village program here. So they came to the village and they recognised some of the people who were in the chanting party, and they're going, were you in the chanting party there? Were you there? And they go, yeah, that was us. It was the Hare Krishnas. And lo and behold, they were dressed in saris last night and they were chanting, putting it out there. So they were on the other side this time. So amazing transformation. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
It's interesting, you just made a comment about how Prabhupada was very strong with his preaching with the Nirvishesha Shubhivadi, the universalists and Buddhists, but also another one of his strong preaching points was against reductionist scientists as well. And that's obviously become more and more prominent now. That's the new religion is reductionist science.
Rational science, that's the new religion.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is no God, there is no soul.
No God, no soul. That's rational science. So therefore, we have to be prepared for these rational scientists. We have to study up too, because they've got very, very conclusive, what they think is conclusive proof. I just said, well, what happens? I said to someone I know, one of my relations, I said, what happens when the soul leaves the body? The body's still got all the elements, but there's no life, so what happens to life? He goes, well, get this phone. So it's, get this phone, you switch it off, right? It's gone, right? Switch it back on again, works, Same thing. What's the difference? Actually, the difference is you can't bring the soul back into the body, that's all. But, they put up these arguments, but if you actually study these arguments and, analyse them, you can really pull them apart. They don't have any arguments. It's just a whole lot of words that they put together, flowery words in contemporary language. It's not much different than what the Smarta Brahmanas in principle, what they're saying. So it's just time, place and circumstance. So we just have to become adept in actually understanding how to present Krishna consciousness in modern day terms. That's very important, actually.
Preaching or presenting Krishna consciousness, he becomes very expert in the philosophy that he's talking about. So he can, in his words, he out-materialises them. He has a better understanding of the philosophy than even the people who are presenting the philosophy to him. So that's also Bhakti, I think Saraswati will also use that technique as well.
Yeah.
Outsmart or
relevant. Yep. Thank you. I won't take any more questions because we don't have a microphone, but thank you for that. And Jai, all glory Srila Prabhupada.